From FingerLakes1.com, this is Inside the FLX. I'm Josh Durso, and today we're talking to one of the newest members of the law enforcement leadership community here in Seneca County. Waterloo Police Chief Jason Godley was named to his post earlier this summer, succeeding Doyle Marquart, who led the force for 38 years. Chief Godley isn't a new face to Waterloo, though, so we're going to get to know him a little better here. Chief, thanks a lot for coming in today.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate the time.
So I guess talk to us a little bit about how you got involved in law enforcement, what it was that attracted you to it, and, you know, when you really thought to yourself when you were growing up, this is what I want to do.
It was funny. I mean, there really wasn't a specific time. I mean, I was in college. I started off actually as a computer science major. Didn't really appeal to me that well as I was getting into the process. I didn't care for it too much. Didn't like being behind a desk all the time. Decided I needed to change. Got into the criminal justice program at Finger Lakes Community College, and from there I did an internship actually at Waterloo PD. It's where I first met Doyle and the guys there, and I fell in love with it. I mean, it was just a place that I always wanted to be. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time as the intern, and that's actually what kicked me off and got me going in my career, and it just spawned from there. You know, it was just an instant love.
Now, what was it like going through the process? Obviously, the Waterloo Village Board went through a selection process. It was time-consuming. They did their due diligence. After someone serves for 38 years, you definitely want to take your time and make the right decision. They chose you. What was it like going through that process, the sort of stresses that came along with it, and obviously after you were selected, what that feeling was like?
It was a long process for sure. Yep. Two of us had the opportunity to kind of try out and see how we did. Mm-hmm. It was difficult. It's difficult for our guys in our department. It's difficult for the two guys that were going through it. I give the officers of our department a lot of credit. You know, they really stepped up. They all did their jobs. You know, they allowed Sergeant Marquart and myself to really run the ship as we would want to. It was hard. It was a lot of hard work. It's hard only being interim because there's certain things you want to try to change or try to do, but not knowing if you're going to be there permanently.
Right.
You know, you weren't able to do some of those things, so either one of us were really able to show our full, I don't think, potential, just given that trial period. But you know, ultimately, you know, the selection committee made a decision, and you know, it's been great ever since then.
So obviously, you've been on the job now since you said July. Before we came on, you said you took over in July. What's that learning curve been like, and what has the experience been like so far?
It's been great. It's a huge learning experience. You know, every day, and literally I say this every day, there's something new I learn about my job. Yeah. You know, there's things that my predecessor did that I had no idea why he would do, and I've slowly understood now why he did certain things that he did. Yeah. But I mean, it's going great. I got a lot of support in the community. The sheriff, Chief Peenstra, have been great resources to me. You know, to be able to reach out and if I had questions with certain things, and even members of my own department where, you know, maybe certain things were unsure, I was able to reach out to them, and, you know, just a really tight-knit group of guys that work well together has made the transition even that much easier. Now,
speaking of that a little bit, obviously from the media, the press side of it, we see sort of how frequently you guys are all working in conjunction with one another just because of the frequency of investigations that cross between different agencies. How important is that sort of working together between all levels of law enforcement, especially in a place where resources obviously are probably a little more scarce than they are in a big city?
That's a huge part of it, is being able to work together and being able to understand what each other are going to do in these situations, and we need each other for backup and for, you know, certain things that go on in the community. And I think, you know, the three department heads we have now work extremely well together. We've all grown up together, you know, through the last 20 years. The sheriff, obviously, him and I worked together for a long time at Waterloo PD, and, you know, Chief Peenstra as well. You know, and we understand how important that is, and how important it is that we all work together, how our road divisions work together. We're starting to work on some interdepartmental trainings to bring the departments even closer, just to try to get, you know, some of that continuity down. So we do have these incidents, we're better prepared to work together.
That is one of my genuine curiosities about law enforcement in general. How do you guys, or how does law enforcement try to stay ahead of what would, it seems like you'd be training constantly. You just never stop training. You'd always be trying to learn new things, trying to figure out what's going to happen next. How much of a challenge is that really?
It is. It's a big challenge. I mean, you look at, we all have budget issues, right? All departments, we're all under this cusp of what we can spend. So training obviously is part of cost. I mean, that you have to be able to prepare yourself, but also be diligent to the taxpayers when it comes to that kind of stuff. So there are now online modules and different ways that are more cost efficient. But I mean, it's just a necessary evil that we have to do is update yearly, if not, more frequently when it comes to training and changing to the times. Laws change. These next couple of years, we've got some major things that are changing here in New York that we all have to come of age to. And that's difficult, and some difficult decisions have to be made, and it does come into training. And it's part of the job. It's part of the job that I like. You said about what brought me to it. It's always that constant change. It's something new. It's something new to learn and something new to involve.
It does never get boring.
Never gets boring.
So one of the questions that a reader asked us was, what is the biggest difference between a larger force like, say, the Geneva or a Rochester Police Department to a smaller, more rural police department? What are a couple of the big differences that people might not expect, or maybe they do, they just don't necessarily see it in their face every day?
Sure. I mean, you look at, use Rochester, for example. They're pretty faceless. Their department, the community doesn't know the police officers that well. You go to these smaller departments like ours, we're well known in the community. They see us all the time. We can offer the community policing aspects of being a small department rather than that nameless, faceless, large department. Our guys do things that aren't necessarily routine police work. I can recall a time myself when I was on the patrol division. 3 or 4 in the morning, an elderly lady in the community called and their toilet was broke, and I fixed it. Those are just kind of the things that people get kind of used to that you would never ever get, in a city environment.
Right.
Just being in the community, being involved in the community, being seen, being involved in community events. Those type of things are huge, and I think you see more in small departments than you do in that large setting.
Does that make the policing easier to execute and more effective in long term, because there is that sort of that personal identification where everybody sort of, I know that guy. It's not just a faceless,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, our community knows our guys. They get comfortable with certain people, and they're more apt to come in and talk to you or help you even. I mean, there have been times where, you're going into a real bad situation. Maybe it's like a bar fight scenario, and you got some people you've dealt with before going, hey, we've got your back. And that's a nice environment to have at times. They do get to know you, and they like to work with you. The public likes to be involved. Mm-hmm.
What biggest challenge you faced thus far, or biggest learning curve part that you've experienced thus far in 4 or 5 months of the job?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's all got its different elements. I mean, I guess part of it, right now is the scheduling part and getting back to staff. That was probably my biggest task when I first came over. We were down a position for 9 months. I mean, and that just taxed our guys so hard in overtime and just being exhausted. So getting, our positions back, getting people hired, getting that part in place so that way we can kind of focus on all the other things. Because if your guys are taxed and tired, it kind of weakens up the rest of it too. So once we were able to kind of eliminate some of that, get the staff, we were able to kind of move forward, and I've been able to do some other different things now. So that's probably, the number one goal when we came in and got it going.
Now, from the leadership perspective, obviously new leadership means you kind of get to pick where you want to focus your energy and where you kind of want to see the force go in terms of working on different things. Any big changes that have happened in Waterloo since you've taken over, or just sort of small incremental changes along the way?
I mean, we've done some pretty large changes. Our department prior to me, we didn't have very many policies or procedures or anything written policies. It was just kind of that old school mentality that probably needed to change. So I mean, that was one of my biggest steps, and we're in that process now. We've issued department policies, rules and regulations, things we've never seen before. That all leads to accreditation. I mean, that's kind of where we're going down the road with that. We're rebuilding and building a new evidence room just to kind of bring us to standards, so that's being done. I've started the website here, Finger Lakes One with you guys. That's going launch here, hopefully relatively quickly. So I mean, scheduling. I'm looking to go do a new schedule starting January 1. So yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of big changes, a lot of work. I definitely jumped in with 2 feet, and the guys have been great support that work under me, and we're working on it all together.
Now, you're a young guy, but you have a lot of years in law enforcement. I'm just kind of curious, seeing sort of the changing landscape. I know the Seneca Falls Police Department does a really incredible job with Facebook, using Facebook as a tool. And the last time I had Chief Beanstra on, sort of getting his take on how social media has changed the landscape of how members of law enforcement do their job. What has your sort of, just speaking more broadly in terms of technology, how have you seen it change the way you and others have to continue doing their job on a daily basis?
Technology has changed. I mean, just 17. So I've been on 17 years. Yep. So just in that time frame, and I started off with handwritten reports. Complaints, domestic incident reports, accident reports. It was all handwritten tickets. So now 17 years later, it's all electronic based. Everything we do is computers. It's in the cars. I mean, that stuff is huge. And now you're adding this whole new aspect to us relatively is the social media aspect of it. And it's a huge tool. I'm on it personally, obviously, so I can see the benefits of what Seneca Falls has done with theirs when it comes to putting some information out. I think it's a great way to push information out to people quickly. Road closures, traffic stuff, events. If we have a suspect we're looking for, that type of stuff. I mean, it's a great way to reach a lot of people in a relatively short amount of time. And
I guess that's the part that I was really interested to hear your take on, because that has to be one of the most surprising sort of changes. Like, we'll see the Seneca Falls Police Department post a photo of some security footage from a gas station or something like that after an incident, and it's like within an hour. People are commenting on it. It's been shared a few hundred times, and that's a game changer for you guys, right?
It's huge. I mean, who knows the community better than the community?
Right.
So you put someone's face out there that's in this area, someone's going to know it, and someone's going to give us a shout and say, hey, that's who that is. I mean, I see that on there, and I see their shares, and I see it's just a critical piece that we need to get involved into.
Yeah. Now, one of the, I'd say probably the most challenging thing that we see in the news on a regular basis is the heroin epidemic, the drug problem. How much of a challenge is it for a small force like yours to have to be contending with this challenge on top of every other part of law enforcement that has to be dealt with?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, heroin epidemic, as they call it anyways, is feeding other crimes. So it's you're not just dealing with a drug addiction. Right. You're dealing with a drug addiction that's now leading to burglaries and robberies and larcenies, and we're constantly dealing with crimes. They're secondary to the addiction. So it's multifaceted. It's not just that one fight. And then on top of that, some of these drugs that are out on the street are deadly. Not just deadly to the people that are using them, but deadly to our officers. So it's another whole safety issue when it comes to training again to our guys to say, listen, when you're out there and you're handling this stuff, you need to be mindful and be careful as to what you're doing. I mean, there's been incidents of, I know some of the troopers, not locally, but exposed themselves and ended up going into overdose and had to be Narcan themselves because of, handling. So, I mean, that led us to change our policies, and I had to come out to our guys and say, listen, if you're going to test this stuff, you got to have 2 officers present, you've got to have Narcan there.
Right.
So we don't want to, inflict it upon ourselves. So, I mean, it's a huge problem. There's not a simple solution, otherwise it would have been addressed by now. It takes a multifaceted approach, and not just a local law enforcement. It's a joint collaboration amongst a whole bunch of agencies working together to try to get some sort of wrap around this problem.
Right. Well, it seems to be that if you sort of follow the press releases and you follow, obviously you guys see the investigation firsthand, but it seems like a lot of the drugs are coming from outside the area. So how is a hyperlocal law enforcement agency going to be able to deal with something that's happening in Rochester? And it would take this sort of all-around effort. Do you think there is enough of that? Obviously, in Seneca County, there's a ton of collaboration happening. Do you think there's enough collaboration happening across the state to get ahead of this problem, though?
I've been a part of some of these coalition groups, and I've sat in some meetings that involves, legislations to law enforcement, corrections, private industry, trying to. This one, I don't think we're going to get ahead of it. It's just containing it at this point. We got to learn how to contain it first before we can actually even reduce it. So, it all comes down to funding. And unfortunately, that's kind of the world we live in at this point. Everybody's kind of pointing fingers saying, I need more money, and no one seems to be able to come up with the money to address some of these issues. And that's kind of where the sticking point is at this point is, Where's the funding coming to help remedy this problem?
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, sort of more broadly, the negative sort of outlook that some people have towards law enforcement, obviously something that isn't felt in small communities like Waterloo or Seneca Falls nearly as much as it is in big cities, but something that I'm sure you guys obviously have to think about, especially when you're dealing with young people, with kids. To that end, how do you guys sort of engage with young people and sort of create that connection at an early age so that, it's personal before it becomes, a problem down the road?
Sure. The inception of the school resource officer was huge. Sergeant Kraft is our school resource officer. Mm-hmm. He's phenomenal. He does a fantastic job at our school. He's well, received by not just the school but the student population as well. Yeah. You walk around with him at an event where there's kids, and it's he's like a celebrity. They flock to him and they go right to him. I mean, that right there is a huge bridge between the youth and us. Mm-hmm. Is that piece. Now, in addition to that, myself and Chief Peenstra and Chief Anderson from Interlaken PD joined with Generations Bank. We got the child ID system, where we're going out into the public and we're creating child IDs. And that's just another time for where the youth can come up to us, engage with us, talk to us, kind of form those bonds that we were talking about. I can remember not too long ago, we did a child ID, and then a few days later, I'm in my civilian clothes at Walmart, and I see one of the kids, and he runs up to me, and he's like, "Oh, I remember you," and we had this nice, exchange. So those things are huge. Being able to be, not just a police officer, but them to experience, the person behind the badge. Mm-hmm.
Now, I personally, I went to school during a time when, if you saw law enforcement in school, in a high school, in a middle school, something was wrong. Something was already going. So it's a change that it's sort of happened in the last decade or so. Talk to us a little bit about what it meant to make that happen in terms of you talk about the sort of community impact, but also there has to be some sort of tangible safety benefit to just having a member of law enforcement present in a school when, sometimes bad things can happen. And if nothing else, it's a shorter commute to have that situation dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice to have boots on ground,
yep.
Right? Have somebody up there to kind of have a pulse on the school, mm-hmm. kind of get a gist of what's going on. Like I said, the bond there now is so big that if something kind of weird is going on, somebody will tip him off.
Right.
Because they trust him and they've developed that relationship. So, from a preventive point of view, that's huge. We've had some little minor incidents mm-hmm. that have been squashed before it got out of hand because of that knowledge and those boots on the ground to actually physically be in the school and being able to, prevent things to happen before it got a little out of hand.
Now, when you're interacting with those kids, I'm sure some of them, it's like you're creating that bond, and some of them are probably looking up to Sergeant Kraft and saying, I want to do that someday. Mm-hmm. How do you, with that sort of looming negativity that does sometimes inflict its way into law enforcement, how do you keep it positive and, remind young people that, hey, this is a really great thing to do. It's a great career path.
Yeah, it's nice just to sit down and talk with them and kids that are interested and, and kind of go through the job a little bit with them. Mm-hmm. You want to attract them, you want to be honest with them too, They watch TV. They see, and they think it's.
You mean it's nothing like what it is on TV?
Right. Everybody thinks it's lights and sirens to every single call,
yep.
and we're going 100 miles an hour with our hair on fire 24/7. Well,
yep.
The real aspect is, hey, there's some paperwork you're going to have to do, and those other elements really aren't there all the time. But just being out there, we can kind of see what people are interested in, and we can talk to them. I've always had an open door policy in our department for the youth to come in. We do mm-hmm. functions with the Cub Scouts and with those certain groups in the community, bring them into the department, show them what's going on, and kind of keep feeding that interest as they show it.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess my last question for you before we let you get out of here, I know you're very busy. What are one of the things that you would like to, and this is a wish list item, what are one of the things that you would like to see happen across the state or even across the country or locally, whatever the case may be, to just make the job of those in law enforcement easier or so that it could just be done more effectively? What is that one of those things where you just, every now and then you just say, boy, this could be so much easier. It should be so much easier. What are some of those things?
It's hard. You look and see what's going on in the community, and not so much in Waterloo and Seneca Falls, but nationwide, right? Okay. We see all these incidents and all this terrible stuff that happens nationwide, right? And a lot of these things could be prevented, I truly believe, if people would just do what they're told. by the law enforcement officer. You know, if they tell you to put their hands on the wheel, just put your hands on the wheel. Don't argue with them. That conflict is going to create more issues, right? Just do what you're told to get through the process. If you did nothing wrong, you know, there's a really good chance you're going to get on your way and without any sort of incident whatsoever. You know, I mean, that's my biggest thing with the communities. You know, just do what you're told. You know, do what the officer tells you to do at that point. You know, get through the process, get where you need to go, and everybody will need to go home safe. I think we can all agree, no matter what side of where you're at, our objective is for everybody to get home safe and back home to their family and to their loved ones, and that's all we ever want to do. As law enforcement officers, as a public, everybody just needs to get home safe and to get through the process as safely as possible.
Now, I think it's worth repeating because you talked about it earlier, but these police officers that you see, these road patrol cops, the people you see in stores and around, highly trained folks. Like, these aren't people just picked off the street and thrown in a cop car. They're highly trained people, right?
Sure.
So what, moving forward now, obviously approaching 2018, new schedule system, what are some of the other things you're hoping to get tackled in 2018, or just some of the things you're looking forward to getting into in 2018?
Yeah, we're looking to, like you said, the schedule, looking to develop and continue to issue out more department policies, some renovations of the police department, the addition of the new evidence room will be done. I'm also looking to create some new community involvement programs. We're doing a little more interaction with the public. I think we can improve there, and being involved in some community events, you know, things of that nature. I'm just trying to create that environment of the community policing more in our department.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today and taking the time to talk to us. Best of luck moving forward as you continue to plow on here through your first year in office.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate you for having me.
Well, that's going to do it for us today. I'd like to thank Chief Godley, our listeners, and, of course, FingerLakes1.com for making this podcast possible. Inside the FLX airs Sundays at 7 p.m. on Spectrum Channel 12 and is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and the FingerLakes1.com app. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.